Know thou of a truth that the soul, after its separation from the body, will continue to progress until it attaineth the presence of God, in a state and condition which neither the revolution of ages and centuries, nor the changes and chances of this world can alter. It will endure as long as the kingdom of God, his sovereignty, his dominion, and power will endure. It will manifest the signs of God and his attributes, and will reveal his loving kindness and bounty. The movement of my pen is stilled when it attempteth to befittingly describe the loftiness and glory of so exalted a station. The honor with which the hand of mercy will invest the soul is such as no tongue can adequately reveal, nor any other earthly agency describe. Blessed is the soul which at the hour of its separation from the body is sanctified from the vain imaginings of the peoples of the world. Such a soul liveth and moveth in accordance to the will of its Creator, and entereth the all-highest paradise. The maids of heaven, inmates of the loftiest mansions, will circle around it, and the prophets of God and his chosen ones will seek its companionship. With them that soul will freely converse, and will recount unto them that which it hath been made to endure in the path of God, the Lord of all worlds. If any man be told that which hath been ordained for such a soul in the worlds of God, the Lord of the throne on high and of earth below, his whole being will instantly blaze out in his great longing to attain that most exalted, that sanctified and resplendent station. The nature of the soul after death can never be described, nor is it meet and permissible to reveal its whole character to the eyes of men. The prophets and messengers of God have been sent down for the sole purpose of guiding mankind to the straight path of truth. The purpose underlying their revelation hath been to educate all men, that they may at the hour of death ascend in the utmost purity and sanctity and with absolute detachment to the throne of the Most High. The light which these souls radiate is responsible for the progress of the world and the advancement of its peoples. They are like unto leaven, which leaveneth the world of being, and constitute the animating force through which the arts and wonders of the world are made manifest. Through them the clouds rain their bounty upon men, and the earth bringeth forth its fruits. All things must needs have a cause, a motive power, an animating principle. These souls and symbols of detachment have provided and will continue to provide the supreme moving impulse in the world of being. The world beyond is as different from this world as this world is different from that of the child while still in the womb of its mother. When the soul attaineth the presence of God, it will assume the form that best befitteth its immortality and is worthy of its celestial habitation.
O Lord, O thou whose mercy has a compassion whole, whose forgiveness is transcendent, whose bounty sublime, whose pardon and generosity are all embracing, and the lights of whose forgiveness are diffused throughout the world. O Lord of glory, I entreat thee, fervently and tearfully, to cast upon thy handmaid, who has ascended unto thee, the graces of the eye of thy mercy. Robe her in the mantle of thy grace, bright with the ornaments of the celestial paradise, and sheltering her beneath the tree of thy oneness. Illumine our face with the lights of thy mercy and compassion. Bestow upon thy heavenly handmaiden O God, the whole fragrance born of spirit of thy forgiveness. Cause her to dwell on blissful abode. Heal her grief with the balm of thy reunion, and the accordance with thy will. Grant her admission to thy holy paradise. Let the angels of thy loving kindness descend successively upon her, and shelter her beneath thy breasted tree. Thou art, verily, the ever forgiving, the most generous, the whole bountiful.
From the sweet scented streams of thine eternity, give me to drink, O my God, and of the fruits of the tree of thy being, enable me to taste, O my hope. From the crystal springs of thy love, suffer me to quaff, O my glory, and beneath the shadow of thine everlasting providence, let me abide, O my light. Within the shadows of thy nearness, before thy presence, make me able to roam, O my beloved. And at the right hand of the throne of thy mercy, seat me, O my desire. From the fragrant breezes of thy joy, let a breath pass over me, O my goal. And into the heights of the paradise of thy reality, let me gain admission, O my adored one. To the melodies of the dove of thy oneness, suffer me to hearken, O resplendent one. And through the spirit of thy power and thy might, quicken me, O my provider. In the spirit of thy love, keep me steadfast, O my succorer. And in the path of thy good pleasure, set firm my steps, O my maker. Within the garden of thine immortality, before thy countenance, let me abide forever, O thou who art merciful unto me. And upon the seat of thy glory, establish me, O thou who art my possessor. To the heaven of thy loving kindness, lift me up, O my quickener. And unto the day star of thy guidance, lead me, O thou my attractor. Before the revelations of thine invisible spirit summon me to be present, O thou who art my origin and my highest wish, and unto the essence of the fragrance of thy beauty, which thou wilt manifest, cause me to return, O thou who art my God. Potent art thou to do what pleaseth thee. Thou art verily the most exalted, the all-glorious, the all-highest.
Grant, O my Lord, that they who have ascended unto thee may repair unto him who is the most exalted companion, and abide beneath the shadow of the tabernacle of thy majesty, and the sanctuary of thy glory. Sprinkle, O my Lord, upon them from the ocean of thy forgiveness what will make them worthy to abide, so long as thine own sovereignty endureth within thy most exalted kingdom, and thine all-highest dominion. Potent art thou to do what pleaseth thee.
Thou hast asked me concerning the nature of the soul. Know verily that the soul is a sign of God, a heavenly gem whose reality the most learned of men hath failed to grasp, and whose mystery no mind, however acute, can ever hope to unravel. It is the first among all created things to declare the excellence of its Creator, the first to recognize his glory, to cleave to his truth, and to bow down in adoration before him. Thou hast moreover asked me concerning the state of the soul after its separation from the body. Know thou of a truth that if the soul of man hath walked in the ways of God, it will assuredly return and be gathered to the glory of the Beloved. By the righteousness of God, it shall attain a station such as no pen can depict or tongue describe. The soul that hath remained faithful to the cause of God and stood unwaveringly firm in his path shall, after his ascension, be possessed of such power that all the worlds which the Almighty hath created can benefit through him. Such a soul provideth at the bidding of the ideal king and divine educator the pure leaven that leaveneth the world of being, and furnisheth the power through which the arts and wonders of the world are made manifest. Meditate on these and be of the thankful.
و لب‌های شیدای روی دلجوی حق، این کره خاک آشیان مرغ خاکی و پرنده ظلمانی است. لذا پرندگان حدائق الهی آشیان در این خرابه دیرینه ننمایند و منزل و مأوا در این گلخن فانی نخواهند، بلکه در کل اوقات اشتیاق گلشن رحمانی نمایند و آرزوی لانه در شاخسار کنند. از قفس ناسوت نجات طلبند و در فضای دلگشای جبروت حیات جویند. علل خصوص آن طیر حدیقه وفا به گلستان الهی پرواز نمود و در ریاض قدس بر فروع سدره منتهی آشیانه ساخت. دیگر شما اگر از این مصیبت محزون و دلخون هستید، او در نهایت سرور و حبور در جوار رحمت کبرا به تهلیل و تسبیح و تقدیس مشغول. ربي أدخل الورقة الزكية الطاهرة في حدائق توحيدك وجنة تقديسك، إنك أنت الغفور العطوف الرحيم. آمين.
He is God, exalted is He, the Lord of loving kindness and bounty. Glory be unto Thee, Thou, O my God, the Lord omnipotent. I testify to Thine omnipotence and Thy might, Thy sovereignty and Thy loving kindness, Thy grace and Thy power, the oneness of Thy being and the unity of Thine essence, Thy sanctity and exaltation above the world of being and all that is therein. O my God, Thou seest me detached from all save Thee, holding fast unto Thee and turning unto the ocean of Thy bounty, to the heaven of Thy favor, to the day star of Thy grace. Lord, I bear witness that in Thy servant Thou hast reposed Thy trust, and that is the Spirit wherewith Thou hast given life to the world. I ask of Thee, by the splendor of the orb of Thy revelation, mercifully to accept from Him that which He hath achieved in Thy days. Grant then that He may be invested with the glory of Thy good pleasure and adorned with Thine acceptance. O my Lord, I myself and all created things bear witness unto thy might. And I pray to thee not to turn away from thyself this spirit that hath ascended unto thee, unto thy heavenly place, thine exalted paradise, and thy retreats of nearness, O thou art the Lord of all men. Grant then, O my God, that thy servant may consult with thy chosen ones, thy saints and thy messengers in heavenly places, that the pen cannot tell nor the tongue recount. O my Lord, the poor one hath verily hastened unto the kingdom of thy wealth, the stranger unto his home within thy precincts. He that is sore athirst to the heavenly river of thy bounty. Deprive him not, O Lord, from his share of the banquet of thy grace, and from the favor of thy bounty. Thou art in truth the Almighty, the gracious, the all-bountiful. O my God, thy trust hath been returned unto thee. It behoveth thy grace and thy bounty that have compassed thy dominions on earth and in heaven, to vouchsafe unto thy newly welcomed one thy gifts and thy bestowals, and the fruits of the tree of thy grace. Powerful art thou to do as thou willest. There is none other God but thee, the gracious, the most bountiful, the compassionate, the bestower, the pardoner, the precious, the all-knowing. I testify, O my Lord, that thou hast enjoined upon men to honor their guest, and he that hath ascended unto thee hath verily reached thee and attained thy presence. Deal with him then according to thy grace and bounty. By thy glory I know of a certainty that thou wilt not withhold thyself from that which thou hast commanded thy servants, nor wilt thou deprive him that hath clung to the cord of thy bounty, and hath ascended to the day spring of thy wealth. There is none other God but thee, the one, the single, the powerful, the omniscient, the bountiful.
O Son of Justice, whither can a lover go but to the land of his beloved? And what seeker findeth rest away from his heart's desire? To the true lover reunion is life, and separation is death. His breast is void of patience, and his heart hath no peace. A myriad lives he would forsake to hasten to the abode of his beloved.
O Son of Spirit, burst thy cage asunder, and even as the phoenix of love, soar into the firmament of holiness. Renounce thyself, and filled with the Spirit of mercy, abide in the realm of celestial sanctity.
Well, I'd like to welcome you, friends, on behalf of our National Spiritual Assembly to this time of remembrance and celebration of a great servant of the faith that the House of Justice has characterized as intrepid, resilient, and steadfast. And this, of course, is our dear Violette Haake. The program for this day will be a reading of the letters of remembrance from our beloved House of Justice, followed by a letter of remembrance and condolence from our International Teaching Center, read by Auxiliary Board Member Louis Ma'ani. Then we will have a letter from our sister National Spiritual Assembly, the National Spiritual Assembly of Australia. That will be followed by a series of remembrances by friends who have served with our dear Violette Haake. The first will be from former member of the House of Justice, Mr. Kaiser Barnes, followed by former member of the House of Justice, Mr. Hooper Dunbar, then former member Dr. Feridun Javahari, followed by former counselor member of the International Teaching Center, Dr. Penny Walker. Then we will have a musical selection from Joan Lincoln, also former member of the International Teaching Center, counselor member of the International Teaching Center. And finally, we will close with a prayer from the niece of Violette Haake, Miss Cholet Quinn. So, dear friends, this will be a wonderful time, and how fitting, a wonderful time of celebration for a wonderful servant of the faith. Now, the letter from our House of Justice. Our hearts sorrow at the passing of dearly loved Violette Haake. Reared in a distinguished family, tracing its roots to the early history of the faith, she served the cause of God with utter dedication over many decades, first in her native Iran, and later in the United States and then Australia. Whether when pioneering or during her time as an auxiliary board member, or as a continental counselor in Australasia, and most especially in the 10 years she served as a member of the International Teaching Center, her intrepid spirit and radiant enthusiasm for teaching were ever in evidence as she rallied the friends, particularly the youth, poured out her encouragement, and fanned the flame of the love of Baha'u'lláh in the hearts. Violette possessed a character that blended extraordinary resilience, steadfastness, and inner strength, with unfailing kindness, a nurturing instinct, and a true joy. To the last, hers was a life devoted to the service of the Lord. To her husband, Roderick, and her daughter, Suzanne, we extend our heartfelt condolences with an assurance of our supplication at the sacred threshold for the progress of Violette's luminous soul as it plunges into the sea of light in the world of mysteries. The believers in every land are asked to arrange memorials in her honor, including in all houses of worship as circumstances permit. The Universal House of Justice. Now, friends, we will have the reading of the letter from the International Teaching Center by Louis Ma'ani.
On behalf of the Continental Board of Counselors for the Americas, I would like to read a letter written by the International Teaching Center upon news of the passing of dearly loved and devoted maidservant of Bahá'u'lláh, Violette Samandari Haake. Her exemplary life of dedicated, selfless service to the cause of God over many decades as a pioneer, a member of the Auxiliary Board, as a continental counselor in Australasia, and a member of the International Teaching Center, is a source of great inspiration to all of us. The International Teaching Center, Baha'i World Center, 25 September 2020, to the Continental Board of Counsellors in Australasia. Dearly loved co-workers, we were grieved to learn of the passing of much-loved Violette Haake, whose extensive and consecrated service to the institution of the counsellors, spanning over 20 years as an auxiliary board member, a member of the Continental Board of Counsellors in Australasia, and from 1998 to 2008 as a member of the International Teaching Center, will be warmly remembered. We recall with heartfelt admiration her tireless dedication to teaching, coupled with her generous, loving, and supportive nature. Please convey our deepest sympathy to her husband Roderick and her daughter Suzanne, and assure them of our prayers in the holy shrines for the progress of her radiant soul in the Apa kingdom and for the solace of their hearts at this time of loss. With loving Baha'i greetings, the International Teaching Center.
To the Australian Baha'i community, dearly loved Baha'i friends, with grief-stricken hearts, the National Spiritual Assembly shares the enclosed message from the Universal House of Justice announcing the passing of a treasured member of the Australian community, Violette Haake, in the early hours of the 24th of September 2020. Violette's extensive services to the Baha'i world, outlined by the Supreme Body in its tribute, was deeply rooted in her ancestors' connections to the heroes and heroines of the faith. This allegiance commenced with the Shaky movement that paved the way for the imminent arrival of the dawn of a new day as foretold in all the books of God. Her forebears recognized the station of the twin luminaries while their hallowed feet walked upon this earth, serving with great sacrifice and distinction the persons of the Bab, Bahá'u'lláh, Abdu'l-Baha, and Shoghi Effendi. Her grandfather was recognized as the favored apostle of Baha'u'lláh. Her paternal uncle served as one of the hands of the cause of God, who guided and administered the affairs of the faith after the passing of the beloved guardian, maintained its unity, and prepared the world for the election of the Universal House of Justice. Qurratul Ain Tahireh, that heroine who was the first of her kind to outwardly champion the cause of the emancipation of women in the East, was the companion of her great-grandmother. With such stories of heroism and devotion, it is no wonder our beloved Violette was such a lion-hearted teacher of the faith and a creative enabler of its progress. The National Spiritual Assembly pays homage to Violette's valiant efforts towards the development and growth of the faith in Australia. She and her family first set foot on Australian soil in 1981, where they promptly pioneered to the small township of Gladstone in Queensland. Her grace and eloquence in representing the faith facilitated the development of strong relations with the local government and media, and her family's tireless teaching efforts played a vital role in the establishment of a strong and vibrant community. Like her kin before her in the rural areas of Iran, Violette traveled extensively and visited remote communities in Australia, offering deepenings and firesides, taking many along with her on this path of service, especially the youth, who were drawn as moths to her flame of joyful, ever-present enthusiasm and deep, genuine love. She served the institution of the Counsellors in Australia from 1986 as a board member for propagation until 1988, when the Universal House of Justice appointed her a councillor member of the Continental Board of Counsellors for Australasia. In 1998, the Supreme Body subsequently appointed her as a counselor member of the International Teaching Centre, where she tirelessly served for 2 terms. Upon returning to Australia in 2008 from the Baha'i World Centre, Violette continued with her passion for teaching and especially engaging with and inspiring her beloved youth. And in her twilight years spent in her Australian home, despite her advanced age or even the limitations imposed by the pandemic, she continued to share the divine teachings in many diverse settings. Violette touched all she came across throughout her long and fruitful life, lived in consecration to her Lord with her innate effervescence and love. She forged deep connections with high and low, young and old alike, and inspired myriad souls to arise and render service to the world of humanity. She expected the best, and people arose to her expectations. She will be sorely missed by a grieving Australian community. The National Spiritual Assembly extends its deepest condolences to the Samandari and Haake families, especially to dear Violette's husband and helpmate, Roderick Haake, and her devoted daughter, Suzanne. Violette's earthly remains will be laid to rest in a private funeral in Melbourne. The National Spiritual Assembly echoes the call of the House of Justice to all households in Australia to arrange in the coming days and weeks memorials in Violette's honor for prayerful reflection on her unbroken record of outstanding service. National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Australia.
Remarks prepared by Mr. Kaiser Barnes. I wish to thank the National Spiritual Assembly for giving me this opportunity to speak about my time with Violette Haake at the Baha'i World Center, and from that good fortune to mention some things I learned from her. I have been remembering those special days with her with prayers of thanksgiving for everything the Universal House of Justice has written about dear Violette in its letter to the Baha'i world upon her passing. How very much we do love her. Everyone admires her great achievements, her warmth, her dignity, her courtesy, and her great strength. She was a thoughtful, sensitive soul, liking humor and laughter. But far beyond these personal impressions are those virtues and qualities the Universal House of Justice has praised in its letter. Her intrepid spirit, Violette's radiant enthusiasm for teaching, the encouragement she gave others, that she fanned the flame of love for Bahá'u'lláh in the hearts. Violette's extraordinary resilience, her steadfastness, her inner strength, unfailing kindness, Violette's nurturing instinct, a life devoted to service of the cause of God. All these qualities were a part, I feel, of that sweet and endearing congenial presence she possessed. It was in all of our associations, a sharing of herself softly and sincerely, a listening, a self-effaced serving, a caring and a noble presence. Everyone around her could open up easily. I enjoyed very much those sort of special, warm morning greetings she and I extended each other in the office of the International Teaching Center. We would be sure to start our day that way. It just happened somehow that those morning greetings became a pleasant and lifting feature of our friendship. I remember always her smiles, her cheerful remarks, and her laughter. Another frequent exchange we had was this. She shared her deep love and interests for the spiritual and social welfare of the Aborigine people of Australia. I spoke about the peoples of Africa and the advancement of the Baha'i faith in some African countries. She increased my understanding of the Aborigines' responses to Baha'i teachings, of aspects of their culture and traditions, their ancient social orders, and some challenges connected with advancing racial unity in Australia. We rejoiced together that Baha'u'llah's revelation is for all the peoples and kindreds of the world, that they too are favored by the Almighty within the compass of a divine, transformative spiritual springtime, which has come for the spiritualization of humanity through Baha'i teachings on the oneness of humanity. Then there is the wonder of the Universal House of Justice's letter that Violette was reared in a distinguished family tracing its roots to the early history of the faith. It reminds me of her love for Iran, the birthland of the twin manifestations of our faith, where along with other spiritual implications, a new morning of divine teachings has dawned once again for humanity, the land of Prophet Zoroaster and of the wise men from the East who found and worshiped baby Jesus. Always in love with the spiritual promise and destiny of Iran, as all Baha'is are, Violette lived Abdu'l-Baha's direction for Baha'is who leave their homes to serve the faith in foreign lands. Every foreign land is a fatherland. For their citizenship, it must be remembered, is in the kingdom of Baha'u'lláh. Another striking feature of her Iranian family roots is this. She was a distinguished member of the extended family of Sheikh Kazim Samandar, an early believer in Qazvin, Persia, one of the apostles of Baha'u'lláh. Shoghi Effendi later conferred upon his son, Mirza Tazaullah Samandari, the rank of Hand of the Cause of God, and his son, Dr. Midi Samandari, rendered distinguished services in Africa, including serving many years as a continental counselor for Africa. We rejoice together over the exemplary manner in which Dr. Mehdi Samandari served the faith in Africa and in other parts of the world, including Iran. She collaborated very closely with him, preparing the published book on the life and legacy of his father, Mirza Tarazallah Samandari, Hand of the Cause of God. Because of the concern she had for the moral education of children, and because I knew something of her family roots, Violette and I discussed how her ancestor, Sheikh Kazim Samandar, organized a program for the moral education of children in his community. The significance of his initiative in engaging Mullah Ali, entitled Mu'alim, a learned Muslim scholar whom he had taught the faith, for the work of educating numerous children merited, I think, a brief mention here. And particularly so, I feel, since Baha'u'lláh in a tablet commended Mullah Ali for implementing his exhortations that children should be educated. He referred to Mullah Ali as the first teacher who has attained the good pleasure of God by carrying out what has been revealed in the Kitab-i-Aqdas regarding children's education. He conferred his blessing upon the teacher and assured him that his name will be immortalized in all the schools throughout the world. As a token of appreciation of his services, Baha'u'lláh instructed his trustee, Haji Amin, to send Mullah Ali the gift of an Abba on his behalf. So it is, we have the favor today to honor in this memorial undertaking Violette Haake's consecrated service to the cause of God. Thank you, Kaiser Barnes.
How wonderful it is to have an opportunity to reflect upon the life and qualities of Violette Haake Samandri. What a wonderful soul she was. Her qualities were so carried so lightly, so beautifully, that you often didn't notice just how kind, consistently loving, and inspirational she was. Very humble in character, a true remnant of the Samandri family. She had wonderful years of service. When I really knew her the best was when she was serving in the Holy Land on the International Teaching Center. I had a number of times opportunities to speak with her by phone, and also then when I visited Australia a couple of years ago, actually to see her again and have time with her. She was always encouraging to me. I don't know, I should have been encouraging to her, but she was always encouraging to me, and said she took the example of the youth classes herself, but then she was a model of classes for Baha'i youth to study their writings right up to the end of her days. I think even within the last year or two, she's still been giving classes in Australia once she returned there from the Holy Land. She had an exceptional way of focusing on the people that she was talking to, showering them with encouragement and appreciation. And I never heard a word of criticism of anybody from her. So always praising people, always seeing the good. And even when people would say negative things in her presence, somehow she deflected and lift the conversation somewhere else, never dwelling on the negative. I'm sure she's going to make an exceptional angel in the concourse on high. She's got all the makings of that. And that was then encouraging to everyone that was around her. I have heard how much she was loved by her colleagues at the International Teaching Center during those years she served there, and how devoted she was to her family and her husband, and pioneering in Australia with her marriage. And she's just an exceptional soul, and wonderful that there's this program to commemorate her memory and pray for the progress of her soul in the world to come. And we wish her every happiness there. And I'd like to end this by sharing some words of Abdu'l-Baha. Bestow upon thy heavenly handmaiden, O God, the holy fragrances born of the spirit of thy forgiveness. Cause her to dwell in a blissful abode, heal her griefs with the balm of thy reunion, and in accordance with thy will, grant her admission to thy holy paradise. Let the angels of thy loving kindness descend successively upon her, and shelter her beneath thy blessed tree. Thou art the ever-forgiving, the most generous, the all-bountiful.
My association with Violette Haake goes back 25 years. Violette comes from a distinguished Baha'i family. She is a Samandari through and through. Her forebears were involved in the Sheikhi movement and recognized and served both the Bab and Baha'u'lláh. Tahireh, the heroine of our faith, was the companion of Violette's great-grandmother. Her grandfather was Sheikh Kazem Samandar, one of the 19 apostles of Baha'u'lláh. Baha'u'lláh has addressed him as, O mortal phoenix, upon thee be my glory. Ya Samandar, alayka Baha'i. And again in another tablet, he is addressed as, O my immortal phoenix, Ya Samandari. And this is how the family name Samandari comes about. The hand of the cause of God, Tarazullah Samandari, was her uncle. She was born in Qazvin, the birth town of Tahireh, and it was a strategy of the early days of the faith that towns and cities with larger number of believers would receive regular visits from prominent, knowledgeable Baha'is to assist in training and deepening of friends, especially children and youth. Qazvin was one of these, and because of its importance as a Baha'i center, the Guardian would ask the Hands of the Cause to visit that community at times for several months and educate the friends. So Violette had met and learned the lessons of love and devotion from such spiritual giants as her uncle, Mr. Samandari, and Mr. Faizi. The impact of that education was with her throughout her life, and she would often talk about it. It is so remarkable that back in the 1940s, Violette went as a single young woman to England to study. In those days, hardly anyone left Iran for education abroad, but for a woman to be selected and sent to go on her own in the years immediately after the Second World War is truly remarkable, and in a way a tribute to the organization that gave her the scholarship, which must have seen in her both in terms of her capacities and her spirit of determination. When she returned to Iran, she was part of the movement for modernizing the health system of Iran. Imagine London when she arrived in. It must have been a difficult time after the war, and the amenities and facilities must have been basic and culture very different from what she was used to. But she was, as always, full of joy to be there, threw herself into her studies and Baha'i activities in the company of so many of the wonderful and stalwart members of the still young Baha'i community of the British Isles. This quality of inner joy and good humor never left Violette, no matter what the circumstances. They were absolutely characteristic of all her interactions with whoever crossed her path. Her love and the kindness of her heart were very disarming and put everyone instantly at ease. She, like her distinguished uncle, had a very petite body, very delicate and slender. But also, like him, she was an incredibly firm and powerful defender of the covenant, and unshakable in her faith and in her commitment. She was extremely resilient and strong. It is hard to imagine that whereas most people at some point in their late 60s tend to leave their services at the World Center, she started her service as a member of the International Teaching Center when she was 70 years old. She responded with joy and vigor, and undertook all what is involved in changing one's residence, carrying on such a demanding responsibility, and served for 10 years with full determination. In her condolence message, the Universal House of Justice refers to the extraordinary blend of strength on one hand and nurturing, one might even say mothering, instinct on the other. The message of the House of Justice reads, Violette possessed a character that blended extraordinary resilience, steadfastness, and inner strength with unfailing kindness and nurturing instinct and true joy. She returned to Australia after her services at the World Center in 2008 and threw herself into service of the cause in that country. She was constantly taking the friends through the books of the Training Institute, studying the writings of Shoghi Effendi with the youth, and reading the messages of the Universal House of Justice with the friends in both English and Persian. She was absolutely tireless and unstoppable. And when COVID came, she, at the age of 92, moved all her activities with the local believers to internet. But she did not stop. When Vida and I met her in January and February this year, 2020, in Australia, she had these activities for 3 nights a week. Literally true to the statement of the Universal House of Justice that said, to the last, hers was a life devoted to the service of the Lord. One cannot talk about Violette's vigorous life of service without mentioning the total dedication and the angelic qualities of Mr. Roderick Haake, who, in addition to his own valuable services to the faith, was such a loyal and dependable husband and life companion to dear Violette. Violette proved to be a worthy granddaughter to the immortal phoenix, Sheikh Kazem Samandar. She was a lion-hearted teacher of the faith and lived a life of servitude until she soared as a bird in the heaven of the love of Bahá'u'lláh, and no doubt has now attained her true immortal station, flying in the heavens of nearness, circling around the throne of her Lord.
It's an honor for me to be able to share some thoughts and memories about Violette Haake. To me, she was what Abdul Baha encouraged all of us to be, a true and loving and trusted friend. The message from the Universal House of Justice described Violette so perfectly that I will draw some lines from it as the basis for my reminiscences. The House of Justice wrote that she was reared in a distinguished family that traced its roots to the early history of the faith. Violette grew up in Qazvin, in northwestern Iran. That was her family home, and that city happened to be also the home of Tahirih, one of the Letters of the Living. Her great-grandmother, in fact, was a companion of Tahirih. Her grandfather was a beloved follower of Baha'u'lláh, disciple of Baha'u'lláh, and Baha'u'lláh himself gave him a name. He designated him as Samandar, and that's where the family surname came from, Samandari. Her Shoghi Effendi, in fact, designated her grandfather as an apostle of Bahá'u'lláh. Her uncle was hand of the cause of God, Tarazullah Samandari, a humble, learned hand of the cause, and the only one who was appointed by Shoghi Effendi that had actually spent time with Bahá'u'lláh. So Violette had this illustrious Baha'i lineage, you might say, but many people never even knew her maiden name was Samandari. She wasn't someone to stand on ceremony. She was a self-effacing, very down-to-earth type of person. She had a deep spirit of consecration to the faith that ran through her veins, but she carved out her own distinguished path of service. And the House of Justice, in its message, refers to her decades of service as a pioneer, as an auxiliary board member, serving for 10 years on the Continental Board of Counsellors in Australasia, and culminating in her 10 years of service on the International Teaching Center. The House describes her intrepid spirit and radiant enthusiasm, and she did radiate enthusiasm, and everyone around her felt it, and it made us, happy, more hopeful, more energetic. It's a wonderful quality to have, to radiate enthusiasm. Intrepid, you might not think of her as being intrepid when you would first see her. She was a rather slight person, didn't seem so very strong and hardy, but in fact she was an adventurous person, had a can-do spirit, and she was unafraid. I always remember going into her office, and I enjoy seeing this picture of her where she's sitting on the back of a motorcycle and the driver is a Pacific Island Baha'i. During the years she was on the Board of Counsellors in Australasia, she served the Pacific Islands and traveled extensively to remote islands, to villages and different places, under rugged conditions often, and she loved it, and they loved her. The House of Justice message also mentions her extraordinary resilience and steadfastness, and related to that, I would add her incredible stamina. Violette began her service at the International Teaching Center in 1998 when she was 70 years old, at an age when many institution members at the World Center are, you might say, retiring. And she served for 10 years until she was 80 years old. And this was a position as an international counselor that required extensive travel, many meetings with counselors and other institutions, national assemblies, visiting communities and cities and in villages. And she never let down, right up into her last days in the teaching center in 2008. She was still fully immersed in the work of the teaching center. Another quality that the House of Justice refers to was that she poured out encouragement. And everyone who served with her would say that. We all felt encouraged. No matter what task or undertaking, Violette was there to encourage. She was particularly supportive of young people. She loved being with the youth when she traveled. And when she returned home to Australia after serving at the teaching center, she really focused a lot of her service on the youth and helped classes with them, focusing on the writings, studying the writings, but in particular, studying the messages of the Universal House of Justice that she felt were so important for the youth to understand. And this she did really until the last days of her life. And as the House wrote, to the last, hers was a life devoted to the service of the Lord. So along with all of this, for me personally, when I think back of my 22 years of close friendship with Violette Haake, what comes to my mind is her wisdom. Yes, of course, she was deeply knowledgeable in the faith, in the writings of the faith, in the teachings of the faith, but she also exemplified true wisdom in so many discussions, so many situations. And she had, I would say, finely tuned instincts for what was appropriate, for what was a wise course of action. So her wisdom is what definitely is what I think about. And looking back over my 50 years, more than 50 years of being a Baha'i, I would have to say that Violette Haake was simply one of the finest Baha'is I have ever known. And I miss her a great deal.
I'd like to say this prayer for the departed, for my precious and beloved Aunt, Violette Haake. O my God, O forgiver of sins and dispeller of afflictions, O thou who art the pardoner, the merciful, I raise my suppliant hands to thee, tearfully beseeching the court of thy divine essence to forgive, through thy grace and clemency, thy handmaiden who hath ascended unto the seat of truth. Cause her, O Lord, to be overshadowed by the clouds of thy bounty and favor. Immerse her in the ocean of thy forgiveness and pardon, and enable her to enter that sanctified abode, thy heavenly paradise. Thou art verily the mighty, the compassionate, the generous, the merciful. Abdul Baha.